Welcome back, everyone. We're taking a deep dive today.
Yeah, into the world of abnormal DevOps iterations. We've been listening to this fascinating podcast.
The first 8 episodes,
Yeah.
and we're ready to share some of the juiciest bits, you know, the things that really made us think.
It's a treasure trove of insights, especially for anyone who's curious about how infrastructure really works and how it's changing.
So much good stuff. I've
Mhm.
got origin stories, we've got leadership lessons, and even like glimpses into where tech might be going in the future.
Are you ready to jump in?
Let's go.
All right, let's start with episode 1. Luke Connies, the creator of Puppet. I mean, his story's a classic, right? He
Yeah.
built Puppet because he was tired of all the manual server configuration. Like, who wasn't?
Oh, I bet so many sysadmins can relate to that. I know I can. But what I find so interesting is how Luke made accessibility a core part of Puppet's design. It wasn't just about solving his own problem, it was about making it easier for everyone.
He actually said, if I were to do Puppet over again, the biggest thing I would change is I would have written it in Python.
Whoa, Python, imagine that. It really makes you think about how the tools we use are shaped by, well, by the technology that was available at the time.
It's like looking back at old photos and realizing how much fashion has changed.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's that story, the one about Luke refusing to give a customer free support.
Yeah.
And that, like, accidentally led to the creation of Chef. Pure DevOps lore right there.
Unintended consequences. That's a good one. Speaking of consequences, Bodan Prokopovich from episode 3 had some really interesting things to say about the cloud. He's the co founder of Karut, a company all about cloud native stuff and observability. So he's right in the middle of it all.
Yeah, he's got a front row seat to the cloud evolution. And he used this great analogy about like building a house with more and more floors to describe how tricky it is to manage these complex
Yeah.
systems. You keep adding on, but the foundation has to be super strong
He said, I think that cloud landscape will be a chaos in some way in 10 years.
in 10 years. Chaos.
Driven by edge computing and local LLMs? Imagine that. Powerful AI just running on our devices. The possibilities are mind blowing, but maybe a little scary too.
Definitely something to think about. Now let's talk about episode 5 and Bartek Plotka. He's a total eBPF expert, and he's a developer advocate at Karut, so he's deep into the world of observability, just like Bodan.
Bartek's all about eBPF, calls it a revolution for monitoring systems.
And he really gets into the nitty-gritty too. He talked about how eBPF allows for radically new approaches and how it enables real-time performance monitoring without modifying your code.
Pretty impressive, right? But he's also careful not to overhype it. He makes it clear that eBPF is just one piece of the puzzle. You need a whole toolbox to really understand what's going on in a complex system.
He's got a good point. But then, just when you think you've got it figured out, he throws this wild prediction out there about the future of computers.
What, the one about computers becoming extensions of our brains? Yeah, I remember that. He said, computers will be an extension of ourselves. They will understand our brain.
I mean, it's a mind-bending idea.
A little bit sci fi, but then again, who knows what the future holds?
Exactly. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about episode 6 and Nigel Kirsten, the CTO of Puppet. He gives us a peek behind the scenes at Puppet's evolution and talks about how important it is for companies to adapt to what their customers actually need.
He really dives into the whole balancing act between, community driven projects and the stuff that's commercially supported, which can be tricky. He even said, I think it's very important that we actually get things written down so everyone's very clear about what Perforce's responsibilities are and how the community's responsibilities are and how it should run.
It's all about transparency and clear communication, which honestly seems like a key theme in so many successful DevOps stories, making sure everyone knows the rules of the game.
Totally. And you know what else Nigel addressed head on? That concern people have about scaling Puppet for really large deployments. He admitted there have been limitations in the past, but talked about what they're doing to make it better.
I like that he was so open about it.
Yeah.
It shows they're listening to the community and working to address those concerns.
Yeah. He also talked about the Puppet Forge, that massive collection of community built modules. That's a perfect example of how powerful collaboration can be.
It really is. It's like a giant toolbox that everyone can contribute to and benefit from.
Okay, so now let's get some real world perspective. Dylan Radcliffe in episode 7 is a DevOps consultant who's been implementing Puppet in all sorts of complex environments for years. He's got some great stories.
He's seen it all. He talks about the challenges that engineers face, especially when they're trying to find those tiny little things that can cause a whole system to go haywire.
Yeah, he called them weird needle in the haystack sort of discrepancies, which I thought was a perfect way to describe it.
Right. It's like finding a single grain of sand on a beach. But that one grain of sand can be the difference between a smooth running system and a total meltdown.
And he's working on this really cool tool, a blast radius calculation tool that uses, get this, LLMs, like artificial intelligence to help understand the potential impact of any changes you make.
That's amazing. Using AI to prevent those needle in a haystack moments.
Exactly. But he also gets into some of the more complicated stuff about the open source world, like licensing abuse. He's pretty straightforward about it too. He said, I think we're slowly working out how to write a license in such a way that prevents that sort of abuse.
It's a tough issue, finding that balance between encouraging collaboration and protecting the people who are generously sharing their work.
For sure. And to wrap up this first part of our deep dive, let's head over to episode 8 and Ben Ford. He's another DevOps consultant with tons of experience, and he's got a fresh perspective on legacy systems and how the whole tool landscape is constantly shifting.
It's a wild ride, keeping up with all that.
Uh,
But Ben really emphasizes the importance of taking things slow, especially in environments where people are, a little bit afraid of big changes. He actually shared a story about a company that reached their goals for the whole year in just 3 months because they took this like slow and steady approach.
I love that story. It's a good reminder that sometimes the tortoise really does beat the hare.
Right. And Ben's also got a great sense of humor about the whole consultant life. He even joked that we don't ever get to use the new hotness tool, which is so relatable for anyone who's been there.
You're stuck with the old, reliable stuff while everyone else is playing with the latest gadgets.
Exactly. But hey, someone's got to keep the lights on, right?
True enough.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in just these first 4 episodes. We've heard about the origins of Puppet, the challenges and opportunities of the cloud, the power and potential of eBPF, the delicate balance between community and commercial interests, the importance of clear communication, and the need for both innovation and stability in the ever evolving world of DevOps.
What a ride. And we're just getting started. There are 4 more episodes to dive into, each packed with even more fascinating conversations and thought provoking insights.
So stick with us, folks. We'll be back in a flash to continue our deep dive into the Abnormal DevOps Iterations podcast. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. Ready for more from Abnormal DevOps Iterations?
Absolutely. Those first 4 episodes were packed with insights. Where do we go from here?
Well, let's circle back to Nigel Kirsten from episode 6. Remember how he talked about balancing community projects with commercially supported stuff? He was really clear about needing boundaries and good communication.
Yeah, he said something like, I think it's very important that we actually get things written down so everyone's very clear about what Perforce's responsibilities are and how the community's responsibilities are and how it should run.
It's like setting the ground rules for a good partnership, you know?
Makes total sense. So, Dylan Radcliffe in episode 7, I loved his take on managing complex systems, especially in the cloud. The analogy he used about searching for a weird needle in the haystack really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one.
It perfectly captures how hard it is to find those tiny discrepancies that can cause big problems.
He's right. And it shows how important it is to really understand how everything's connected, how those dependencies work.
And speaking of finding problems, that blast radius calculation tool Dylan's working on using LLMs, that's pretty mind blowing.
Oh, absolutely. It's like bringing AI into infrastructure management.
He said it's important to be pretty opinionated about what that information is
Yeah.
that you feed into the LLM. It makes you realize it's not just about throwing data at AI and hoping for the best.
You've got to use it strategically, thoughtfully.
Yeah.
Okay, so Dylan also brought up something kind of sensitive, open source licensing abuse.
Yeah, that's a tricky one.
He said, I think we're slowly working out how to write a license in such a way that prevents that sort of abuse, but it's definitely an ongoing challenge.
Finding that sweet spot between encouraging collaboration and making sure developers' work is protected, it's not easy. Now, Ben Ford from episode 8, his perspective on taking things slowly, incrementally, it was refreshing.
Especially in those risk averse environments, right?
He told that story about a company that met their whole year's goals in just 3 months by taking that approach, slow and steady.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the fastest way forward is not always a full sprint.
I love that story. Oh, and Ben's take on being a consultant. often being stuck supporting older technologies instead of getting to play with the new stuff. It was hilarious and so true. He said something like, "We don't ever get to use the new hotness tool."
Yeah, someone's got to keep those legacy systems running, but it's got to be tough when you want to experiment with the cutting edge tech.
Right. Okay. Ben also gave us some great insights into the whole platform engineering trend and the need for more specialized roles like Kubernetes administrators.
Yeah.
He said platform engineering has sort of risen on the backs of every other attempt at platforming that's out there, which I thought was a really interesting observation.
Yeah, it shows how the field's evolving, becoming more specialized as things get more complex.
So these last 4 episodes, they really built on what we learned in the first half of our deep dive. Clear communication, collaboration, finding that balance between innovation and stability, it all keeps coming up.
It's like a thread running through all these conversations, and it makes you realize that DevOps is about so much more than just the technical stuff.
It's the human element too, understanding how people work together, how to build trust and communicate effectively.
As we head into the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear what's resonated most with you. What are your key takeaways so far?
Wow, what a journey it's been going through these first 8 episodes of Abnormal DevOps Iterations. So many great conversations, and not just about the tech itself.
Yeah, it's amazing how much you can learn from hearing those firsthand experiences, those insights from people who are right there shaping the DevOps world.
Absolutely. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm thinking, what are the biggest takeaways for us? Like, what are those big ideas that stuck with you?
One thing that kept coming up for me was clarity, especially when it comes to communication, like Luke Connies and making Puppet accessible to everyone, Bodan Prokopovich talking about clear boundaries between open source and commercial stuff, Nigel Kirsten and being transparent about Puppet's roadmap. It's all connected, right?
It's like good communication builds trust, it helps people collaborate better, and it avoids conflicts down the road.
Exactly. And, this idea of balance, it kept popping up too. Bodenden's analogy of the cloud as a house with more and more floors, you need that strong foundation.
Hmm.
And then Bartek Plotka cautioning against getting too hyped up about any one technology like eBPF.
It's a good reminder. You need that balance between pushing the limits and making sure things are stable.
And being adaptable. The tech world's constantly changing. Luke Connie's thinking about Ruby versus Python. Dylan Radcliffe using LLMs for infrastructure management, Ben Ford talking about the rise of platform engineering. It all points to the need to stay curious, to keep learning, and to be willing to try new things.
It's true. You can't get stuck in your ways in DevOps. You got to evolve, you got to experiment. And that actually brings me to another big takeaway, the human element.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Behind all the tools and code, it's people.
Right. It's their creativity and their collaboration that make things happen.
It's the passionate developers building tools to solve problems, the consultants out there dealing with legacy systems, the leaders shaping the future of infrastructure. It's about people working together.
And building a culture where people can communicate openly, where they can learn from each other, and where everyone feels like they can contribute.
So here we are, wrapping up our deep dive into abnormal DevOps iterations. One final thought. As we navigate this ever-changing world of tech, it's so important to remember that human connection, that sense of community.
It's about using technology in a way that's ethical, that brings people together.
It's been an incredible journey exploring these conversations, and I hope you've gotten as much out of it as I have. Seriously, check out Abnormal DevOps Iterations if you haven't already. You won't regret it. Until next time, keep on deep diving.